Hi, my name's Nick. So today's podcast we're talking about mental health and how just today we live in a society that's pretty prosperous. So we want to talk about why mental health is on decline, even though that um our way of living is on going up and getting better every day. So I work at a tech company. I'm 25. I dropped out of college probably to save my mental health, but I got a good job now, so it was all that good in the end. So yeah, that's me. I'm Nick.
Hi, I'm David. I'm the co-host. I spend most of my time at home and going to doctors as I am pretty sick right now. But I spend a lot of time making games and reading and writing and trying to keep myself busy and obviously doing podcasts on the side. Erica, could you go ahead and
Oh
introduce
yeah,
yourself?
sorry, absolutely. Hi, my name is Erica. I am in grad school right now, actually, for evolutionary biology, which has positive and negative effects on my mental health. And I think that despite the pandemic, which is definitely also having effects on everyone's mental health, it is just really interesting to think about why we're seeing what we're seeing, even though, aspects of our lives are getting better every day and every year. But yes.
All right, Enrique.
My name's Enrique. I just recently completed my degree for video technology. I got my associates in that through Dallas College. I'm going to be starting up my first full-time job pretty soon, so that's something exciting for me. So, uh, yeah, the topic is interesting to me. I have noticed a lot of different things with what I've done, so I'm pretty interested in talking about this myself. So, looking forward to it.
Okay. Awesome. So the first question is actually just talking about like um pros and cons of living in technology age. It's a lot of ways it's hard to think of cons because I mean like cell phones are so nice and like always knowing where you're going where you're driving, it's so nice and like being able to call anyone anytime. So it's definitely a lot of pros, always having food, having refrigerator, all this storage and things like that. And when you talk about the cons, I don't know. Somebody else want to bring up some cons because it's a lot easier for me to think of pros of living in today's age.
Well, I think a pro and con is just the convenience of it. It's just becoming so reliant on the tech itself. Some people don't know how to sustain these things on their own if something doesn't work how they want it to or need it to.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was actually going to say, I think that a lot of the pros, like past a certain point, kind of become a con for certain people or like in certain contexts because it is great to have all of these things available to you. But then on the flip side, like social media, for example, it's really great to be connected to people from throughout your life in a way that like other generations never could. But the flip side of that is like you can have a lot of fear of missing out or just inherent like it's in your face and you're comparing your life to other people's lives constantly, which I think a lot of people struggle with different aspects of that. So, yeah, the good things can become bad things
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
I agree with that. I know my patience has suffered because like if I'm on the internet and something loads for more than like 30 seconds, I'm freaking out. Like I have no patience for that. Like it's so annoying.
Feel that
Right.
too.
Something that's just loading.
I think a lot of the cons and pros come a lot from depending on how we, the users, use the technology available to us. So, for example, if you're like Erica was talking about, using social media, for example, it can really connect you to people. It can really show you the good in the world. But, for example, one of my friends, she spent a lot of time for a while being on Reddit, and she would look at essentially like gruesome stuff on Reddit and like gross stuff on Reddit. And it got to a point where it was hurting her mental health because she kept looking at all this like bad content on Reddit instead of looking at like good stuff. And I think also another thing that comes into play too is how often you use these things. If you're always on social media and that's all you're ever on, and that's all you spend your time doing is using social media, posting on social media, consuming other people's social media, and you forget to live in the real world or forget to use other bits of technology, for example, then it becomes this thing where it's just really bad and hurtful to your health. But that goes into a whole argument of just everything in moderation.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue. And the next question, kind of like the main topic is, so why is depression so prevalent? The like, quote unquote better our lives get or the richer we become. So yeah, it seems like they're almost correlated. Like the richer and more prevalent you become, the more susceptible you are to depression. So it's like it's a really interesting correlation, and like anyone from the outside would see the opposite. Like, wow, why did Robin Williams commit suicide? He's everyone loves him. So it's just a hard thing to see from the outside. But I feel like now that we're all living as adults on our own in this rich society, we can kind of have more insight on why somebody would be having depression even though everything's going good.
I think besides the fact that depression is, more of a chemical imbalance in the
Yeah, we're
brain,
talking about,
it's
I
like,
guess I'll clarify. We're talking about normal depression that's not due to chemical imbalance.
so you're talking about like depression caused
So
on more from like
Like
the effects of our
situationally.
like situational and
yeah,
like
yeah,
our
we're not going to go
okay,
into any chemical imbalances and medications at all.
okay. Then
I
in
think in
that
this case,
case, oh, go
it
ahead.
looks like it's just easy to burn out because there's just so much you can do at a time now. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so accessible to everyone. I think that has a lot to do with it. Is you can do all of this, and yeah, that's great, but you reach a certain point, you're like, what else am I supposed to do now?
I
Yeah,
think, yes, society is just like from the technology aspect, I think all of these things are changing so rapidly and it's so exciting, but it's hard for um there aren't really any like limits or balances and people aren't like you can't know ahead of time what's healthy, right? You kind of have to go through it and be like, okay, never mind, that wasn't great. And it's just kind of hard to keep up with it when things are changing so fast. Like there's not a blueprint for it because other people haven't gone through this and had to juggle all of these like aspects of their life in the same way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think happiness is very much connected with purpose. And back in the day,
Yes.
if you grew up on a farm, you had this big purpose. Like you were helping on that farm. If you didn't do it, the food wouldn't be there. And so you felt fulfilled. And nowadays, people will put you out and they say, you got to make this much money for rent, but basically you're on your own. So it's really hard for people to find a passion or a purpose in anything and stick with it because sometimes you're doing it and you always just have like this creeping doubt that maybe you should have studied something else, maybe you should have gone to a different school. There's just because of the options we have, it almost causes like a loop of doubt to constantly run inside everyone's heart that they might not be on the correct path. And before, I guess there wasn't a correct path. It was just that's what you do. There wasn't
Yeah.
a way to break out of the cycle as easy now.
I think
Yeah,
that
I wouldn't completely agree with that.
did you say would or wouldn't?
I would definitely.
Oh, okay.
I've definitely like yeah, I've been in that exact situation like deciding whether or not to continue on with my education. Yeah, it's just so hard when there's you have so many like you have so much freedom to choose, but it's hard to know how something's going to go and so like the choice can be paralyzing. I also think
Awesome.
in kind of going along with what you've said, like your path was kind of just laid out. People's worlds were just smaller, even a generation
Hmm.
ago, like things were just less connected. And I think in a way that can also take a huge toll on people's mental health. Like just hearing about
Hmm.
these tragedies around the world and we can hear people's firsthand accounts of how everything is affecting them. And I don't necessarily know that like the human brain evolved to even be equipped to handle that. I think it's just so much to put on, one person's small little brain who has their own real life problems they're trying to deal with, but then you have to keep all of these other things in mind if you're like reading the news or on social media, like you're gonna just come across that stuff.
I really like how you said
So,
like a bigger world. Sorry.
no, that's fine.
Yeah, just because it seems like society's built so we have 1,000 casual friends versus 5 really good friends. And it just like we all kind of fall in that loop where we don't create like a deep connection and like serve somebody a lot and invest a lot in one person because of how fast our lives are moving and we're meeting new people. It's just like built to invest in a lot of different people. So we do miss like those deep connections because we're connected to so many different people on a more casual level.
Yeah, that's such a great point too. I think people have just a lot more like potential for mobility. Like it's so common nowadays for people to move across the country or move internationally. Like I'm sure all of us know lots of people who have done those things and then you kind of know like have to restart without any roots. And so that can be hard too. And even if you're not doing that, I'm sure there are lots of people from your life that are moving on and moving away and that makes it harder to keep those like long time connections, which I
Mhm.
think are like one of the more meaningful parts of a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, for sure.
With that in mind, how have you guys kind of held on to connections? How have you guys held on and held on to your roots, held on to reality to the point where you're not consuming too much, just information from the world? What are some ways you two, Erica and Enrique, have done this to help better your own mental health?
I think for me, it's kind of about having like boundaries with myself and having like self-care in the form of self-discipline. Like if I know going on some app is like I've noticed it's been taking a toll on my mental health, like then I just have to set that limit with myself. Or if I know I feel better after chatting with a friend that I haven't seen in person in a while, like I'll make myself schedule out time a certain number of nights a week to do that, It's kind
Hmm.
of like yeah, having boundaries with myself.
Enrique, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think for me, it was just at some point I had to figure out what I wanted to do because I felt like for a long time it's like I'm being told like what's good, you should accomplish this. And so at a certain point, I just started making these friends that had their own ideas and what they wanted to do, and I was constantly flipping from one thing to another. Because I know for a long time I used to want to be like a writer or something. I tried pursuing that just a little bit, but then I thought, well, this looks cool too. And I even looked at like if I want to be a detective or something. And it's like each step I took eventually led me to a different like circle each time. But I still have the friends that I had in the beginning, and they would just follow along with me. And I think that helped me a lot. Having my continuous friends and then meeting new people with similar interests. And
Yeah.
that's what carried me along from each thing.
I have a question for you too, Enrique, and it's kind of next question, but it's um why do you think like we feel so much dread nowadays? Like when we wake up in the morning, like just the mundane daily tasks. Like why do they feel so much harder than before?
Before when?
Like for an example, as a kid, I was homeschooled and it was pretty easy to do versus when I went to public school, I hated it. And I would be doing like kind of the same thing, but I would hate one and not hate the other. And I feel like it was almost like because there was agency in homeschooling, that just made it so much more enjoyable. Does that make sense? Like,
I think
because
that's a big part of it,
Yeah.
the agency of
yeah,
it.
yeah, and so like I feel like today a lot of agency is being shred away from people. Like instead of having your own project that you're passionate about, like you wake up and you're
Right.
excited to like make a video that you really, really want to make,
Mhm.
versus going to a job for somebody else's dream, basically being one of their servants.
Okay, I'm glad you said it like that because that's like exactly how I felt in my high school. So it was advertised as being like the collegiate institute, so you're going to get your college credits while you're in high school. But what they didn't emphasize until after the fact was that it was a lot of engineering focus. something I had never looked at. And I tried doing it because I had multiple options. I had the aerospace, the technology, as well, like just computers, stuff like that. I couldn't get into any of it, and because of that very closed space, I couldn't even figure out what I wanted. So I graduated, and I ended up graduating a semester early. And I was just there, just kind of like, well, what do I do now? I feel like I didn't like the engineering, so I can't do anything with that, even though that's everything I was just taught. So I just got these jobs randomly for a little bit, and then my only passion at this time was music, so audio. I was trying to find something with that. And so it was when I realized, like, okay, there's a college near me that has something to do with that. I finally have the options that actually pertain to me. Now that I have the choice again.
Yeah, and I think that the big thing of dread is that whole, am I choosing this life? If you wake up and you know you're choosing a life, you wake up happy, right? But if you wake up and you feel like I have to take this class because it's mandatory for my, major, but it does nothing to do with my major. I have to take Spanish, even though I'm doing a major in engineering. So it's I feel like there's a lot of agency stripped from us these days through like how society's built.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot as well. I think I was gonna bring up that I feel like it's really important to have personal agency, but I feel like it's also really important to feel like you're like surrounded by groups of people who are, not completely like-minded, but in general think the same things are important that you think are important. And I feel like things are really divided today, but also just it seems like there's so many aspects of like life growing up in America that everyone kind of just takes for granted and like no one questions it, even though I feel like it might not be like that relevant or like supporting the society today like in the way that people really would benefit from. Like we're kind of still sold these ideas of the American dream where like if you go to college and if you become like an engineer or a nurse or a teacher or whatever one of these like really common careers, then like you'll be able to buy a house and settle down in a neighborhood, and like then that'll just be like the building blocks of a happy life. But I feel like things are so different now that but it's not really acknowledged like that there's a lot else out there besides these things, and like it might not even be possible for us to like build a sustainable life with those careers anymore, like just because of the state of our economy and stuff. But it's
Yeah, and
this
like
outdated
let's say,
dream.
yeah, even like he said something like super profound, was like he had no desire to do that, even though it was success. So basically, let's say he did become an engineer and was making $500,000 a year at a company. 40, 50 hours a week of his waking life, he would hate himself, right? He would hate his life. And so it's like, even though he has the American dream, he'd have a house, he'd have his family, stuff like that. He'd have to go to work, 8 hours a day or whatever, and do something he didn't like. So is
Mhm.
that a dream life? More than half
Right.
your time spent doing something that you hate.
I feel like some things we've touched on to kind of like recap a little bit before we continue forward is like one, I feel like it wasn't really said like outright, but comparison being a part of your life in today's society and like in the way today with technology and everything works is super unhealthy. A lot of people brought up like, oh, like, I'm around all these people, I'm around people who have these things and I want to kind of like be like them, or I'm around people who have these dreams in a certain way and I want to be like that. Or am I like living up to my potential? Am I living up to this different dream that I have or this dream that I had? And I think comparison being there in your life at all is something you should really look at and be like, I should not have this in my life. I should not be comparing myself to other people in a way that leads to me just beating myself up. I think comparison. I don't. I can almost never think of like good examples of comparison. And that's a whole different topic. But another thing that got brought up a lot was how the kind of people you surround yourself with, um, and then balance. So surrounding yourself with certain people and balance kind of go together, is in the sense where you have to have that balance between people that you're really close friends with, people you can rely on, people that, like, if you became where you couldn't move. Sorry, I can't think of how to say that word.
Paralyzed?
Yeah, paralyzed. So like if you became paralyzed, if you're good enough friends with this person, they would come and take care of you. Like you need to have people like that in your life who just you can rely on and love and support you and help you through all of the trials in life. But then you also need to have people who have like similar interests, like Kike was talking about, people that are, in the same field of study, people that are going to help promote your goals, people that are going to push you forward, people that are going to help support the dreams that you have. And that goes into balance, where you need to have that balance between a life of, I think, that like quickness, of those like quick connections, of those quick bonds that we create with people and with jobs and with different things, and then setting your roots into place and having really good boundaries for yourself, like Erica was talking about earlier, where
I think
you're saying, I'm
we're
not going
jumping
to do these
across a
certain
little
things.
bit. I think we're jumping across a little bit too many different topics all at once here.
I'm just trying to.
I
I
would,
was just trying to like recap everything that we had done and talked about, so that we could go into the next thing, knowing like, all right, so like these are a lot of these things that cause depression. These are a lot of the things that like lead to depression whenever we have these things out of balance and out of whack. So with that in mind, we can
yeah, I
ask
just
the
wanted
next
to
question.
touch on comparison that you mentioned that. So comparison is actually something I thought about a lot because people in Utah at least say that like it's a big issue here. But for me, I was always wondering, it's like I'll see like a fitness model on Instagram, and it'll make me happier, right? Seeing them succeed, and other people will make them sadder. So I was like, whoa, what's the psychological difference between those two people that one person gets sadder, one person gets happier? And I come to realize that it's your inner monologue. So it's your self-esteem, as other people call it. So my inner monologue, I have pretty high self-esteem, is always positive. So I see a buff person or something, in really good shape. My inner monologue says like, oh, if you start working out, you can achieve that. Like you can look like that one day. Like it's possible for you. So like my inner monologue is pretty positive all the time. And so it defaults to seeing positive. But if somebody has low self-esteem or a negative inner monologue, kind of what self-esteem is, right? How you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
You'll immediately say, you'll never be like that. You're not beautiful and all these negative things. So it's your level of self-esteem when you see somebody else succeed, how that affects you.
Absolutely. So I guess I was just gonna ask, like, how would you, Nick, say that what's a way you can keep your inner monologue or your self-esteem higher than lower to
I
avoid
mean,
running into that problem?
for sure, it's habit in the end. So like, I luckily I had like siblings that would constantly compliment me. And so I did develop that habit as a young age, but most people don't have that luxury. So the only thing you can do is compliment yourself, and it feels like super cheesy and stuff like that. You're complimenting yourself. But if you do compliment yourself, and feel like if you start an inner monologue basically of positive thinking, it'll continue if you like keep practicing at it and keeping it positive and catching it when it's negative and reversing it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people say, "Oh, that's pride," and it's like, um, I see how like people can perceive it as pride, but it's kind of splitting hairs when the difference between pride and
Love.
confidence, yeah, or love,
It's
confidence.
like confidence is like self-love. I feel like almost.
I haven't heard it
Yeah.
put like
So
that. I like that.
yeah, because like pride would be like, I'm better than this fitness model, but that's not the thought at all.
Pride
It's
is putting yourself above others.
yeah, exactly. You're putting somebody, you're trying to put yourself above somebody else, but it's not about that. It's literally just talking to yourself in a positive way, like you would talk to one of your friends, right? You're basically your own friend.
Yeah. Erica, would you say that you have a good balance between complimenting yourself and putting yourself down, or not putting yourself down, but like, keeping yourself in check, I would say, so that you don't
I would
Like, or maybe not that question, but like, how is one way you've seen yourself kind of keep yourself in check, and how is a way you've seen yourself give yourself love?
I would say that right now I am in a good balance of that. It definitely has been like a process of like learning, how to kind of do both sides, right? Because I want to give myself credit where I deserve credit, but I also want to be honest with myself about things that I do need to work on. Not like appearance wise, but like some some hobby I'm trying to learn or like some skill I'm trying to work on at work. Like those are things I want to be honest when I'm checking in with myself about like where am I at with this, right? And I don't want to do it to put myself down, but just to like it's okay to admit if you're not where you want to be with everything.
Yeah.
Um and I think it's just been a process of like really learning like how to be fully honest with myself. Like even when it like hurts or sucks to admit, oh yeah, like I didn't handle this that well, but I'm gonna, work on something so that I can handle it and be more of the person I want to be next time or something like that. Being honest in the good when I get to say good things and when I have to say bad things, I guess.
Yeah.
And Kike, what about you? What do you think with your inner monologue and thoughts?
I feel like I have gotten better. I think a part of it was I finally figured out an outlet for me to feel like I had more than just like, just working or something. Having some kind of creative outlet helped a lot. Finding an interest that I could potentially find a new living off of. So getting into music and then film, that sort of thing. I'm able to be creative and have fun with it, but I can also find something practical along those lines. And I think that helped me a lot with my confidence. Like I used to be terrified to talk to people in general. I still kind of like that. But if I'm able to introduce myself, if this is what I like, this is what I aspire to, some people they'll even help me along. Others will just like, "Oh, that's interesting. You can tell me about that." I think that was the biggest thing was I needed to find something that felt like a purpose for myself. And I think that's a
Mhm.
good thing for people. Even if they're not happy, they find a comfort where they realize that's what it is. They get comfortable with whatever they're doing, even if they want it to change. It's just making the change happen is difficult because they're just so used to being in this one mindset.
So, with all this in mind, I kind of have like a question to ask you guys. It's definitely more of like a personal question to ask, not personal of you per se, but personal like to me. Something because I feel like I've been struggling in this area a lot with that kind of like self monologue and looking at myself and be like, oh, I can compliment myself in certain areas, and it's not like all areas that I struggle with. Like emotionally, I'm like really happy. I'm very happy right now. I'm probably the happiest I've been like in a year, which is awesome. But physically, my body is like deteriorating at like a very rapid rate. I'm going to doctors like every week, like several times a week. Every doctor I see is just like, wow, it looks like things are fine, but then I don't feel fine. And but then every once in a while we find something new that's happening to me, and so there's just been like a lot of stress and like fear that's come from that. And so I wanted to ask, with if you guys, I'm sure it's happened before, but like let's say you were going through something like I'm going through, where it's very pinpoint and focused. Like I struggle with my body image in the sense of like loving my body, not because of like my weight or anything, but like mainly just because it's like, wow, my body is like beating me up. It feels like, how do I love something that's like attacking me? So like, how what kind of advice would you guys like give me in that circumstance, or someone else who's struggling with, like, let's say it was like their mental health or their the way they like have dreams and goals that they are not meeting, like if you're giving
Yeah,
yourself advice in the
I
past,
would
Kike.
say. Oh,
I was just gonna say, like, like Kike struggled with that, like, whole having, he was going to school and he didn't feel happy with it, and he had these goals, like something not for me exactly. I want this advice, but like someone who's struggling with something that's really pinpoint and focused in their life, like,
hmm no, I
what do
get the
you,
question. I
what
would
kind of,
think
yeah.
Erica hit the nail on the head with that one. So she says she's good at talking to herself positively, but she recognizes when, um, to critique herself.
Mhm.
So I think the biggest thing is when she says critique herself, it was very constructive. right? So it was like she noticed it so she could change it. So I think the biggest thing is, so if you say, I hate my body, that's negative. It's not a critique. It's not, it doesn't help at all, right? You wouldn't say that to your friend, I
Yeah.
hate your body, right? So I think it's, you can talk negative about your situation, like, I'm wasting time. I've been being a loser lately because, like, let's say I'm just like not doing anything, watching TV or something like that. Like, you can say stuff like that to yourself if you're saying it in a critiquing way, as you would talk to a friend, because you're saying it with saying like, "Oh, these are the things I like about myself that I would like to change," versus "I'm ugly, I'm a loser, I'm dying," as um as I've heard you say it like many times. But it's like you say it with like, it's saying it with like no, just to beat yourself up or like to put yourself down. There's no, these are the things that I can change and want to change. It's just only negative. So the negative has to come with the idea of how to turn it around.
I guess I just get lost in that idea whenever my brain is like telling me like there's like literally nothing I can do to change the circumstances I'm in, like physically, and like that might be true to an extent, but like I said, like emotionally, I've been really happy.
Mhm.
It's like the only time I get really down and like is whenever my stress from my body just starts to like kind of overwhelm me. So it was, but I think you're right. Like if I'm consistently talking about like, oh, I'm falling apart, I'm breaking, like I'm just feeding into the idea of me like slipping and like those plates like breaking apart, like I'm I'm gonna like at the very least speed up the process of having like a breakdown if
Mhm.
I'm thinking about how I'm breaking down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
I would definitely agree with that. I was gonna say, I think my biggest piece of advice would be just trying to like sit with acceptance for whatever the situation is. Like, I've struggled with that in the past with always striving to like love my body versus, in times when I was really self-conscious about my appearance and like definitely hated parts of my body. But like loving it and being super proud of it is great, but I think something even like more healthy and longer lasting is just accepting it for what it is. And I've even like, tried to work on that in terms of like my mental health struggles. Like if I'm in a really bad place with anxiety, thinking about like I hate like I can tell why I'm like what triggered my anxiety, but I hate that I'm having these anxious thoughts. Like I hate it. I wish I wasn't having these thoughts. That just makes the entire thing worse. And I'm never going to love that I'm having those thoughts, but I can at least accept these are the thoughts that I'm having. I'm going to sit with them until like I can let this feeling pass, basically. So acceptance, I would say.
That was beautiful.
And Kike, any last thoughts on that
Uh,
or on
Thanks
anything
for
we've
that. I
talked
think that's
about?
a good one. I'm pretty sure mine really is just for a lot of people, because when you start looking at yourself, sometimes you just need to find a purpose. You just need to find something that you're interested in, what you want to do, that you feel that you could become good at or that you would like to be good at. Just having that sense of purpose can build up your self-image a lot.
Mhm. I've definitely been blessed. Sorry, I don't mean to talk about myself so much. I just wanted to say I don't want people to be like, oh wow, this guy says like his life sucks. It's like no, like I've been really blessed in a lot of different ways, and I wouldn't want anyone to ever think anything other than that. Like I a lot of my hobbies had to like change with my health problems. Like I used to be really outdoorsy and like play a lot of sports, and so like I was obviously there's like a huge shift in like what I was doing, and I kind of picked up like video games and game design and writing and reading a lot more after my health problems kind of like kicked into full drive. But I picked up those hobbies with like a passion. And I don't. And I think if I hadn't had the health problems, I wouldn't have developed these passions for these things that I absolutely love doing so much now. And so I think I just want to like if everyone's okay with this, like kind of end on a thought of like, what is something that like in these times that has been bad for you in a sense, like been a trial that has led to you growing in some way, and how did it help you grow?
I can start. And honestly, it really ties back to the last thing that I just monologued about, which is anxieties. And I would say like pandemic-centered anxieties and just how much daily life has changed and how it's made life hard in a lot of ways for a lot of different people. Um, I think a lot of us have a lot of anxiety about that. But for me, it's just been another opportunity to not be upset with myself for having, whether they're valid or not, they probably are, but whether they're valid or not, like it's okay that I'm having these thoughts and to just give myself space to feel it for a minute and then let it pass and like just being more accepting of all the thoughts that I'm having, like is going to prepare me for all the other stuff that's inevitably going to make me anxious later on in life. It's okay to feel it, but accepting it makes it easier to feel it and then move on from it, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very mature of you to like step outside of yourself during those moments, and instead of letting the anxiety take you over, just notice that it's there, step outside of yourself, and just let it run through your body until it's gone its course.
Yeah, my therapist has told me a lot about like, if you try and shove it down, like the more you do to try to avoid it, that means it's probably gonna be worse when it ends up like over building up and overtaking you at some other point.
You know, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Just real quick, my therapist, the last time I met with him, like I was telling him all the stuff that I was going through, and he's like, "Wow, that just really sucks. Like you're going through a lot. Like it sounds like you're breaking down." I was like, "Why is this guy saying all this?" And like now that like having these conversations with you guys, it kind of makes me realize I think he was trying to get me to just like accept what I was going through instead of like shoving it down like I had been doing.
Mm-hmm.
I need to talk to him about that next time we meet with him. But anyway, Enrique, any thoughts on the question I proposed? Proposed?
I don't think I have anything more to add on to that one.
Any last thoughts in general then?
I think that was just my big thing, as I've been saying, was I just
Purpose.
wanted to find purpose, my own identity, I guess was figuring out what I wanted to do over what others would expect from someone else.
I think that's super wonderful advice. I think that could be relevant to like people in almost any stage of their life is don't live for other people, like live for yourself and what you want. See, that might sound like selfish at some degree, but like if you are spending every day of your life trying to please all of those around you, you won't be happy.
Yeah, I think a good way to put it is live for love. Like live for
Yes.
the people
Yeah,
that
that's
you
better.
love, live for doing the things that you love, like live for love.
Mhm.
I think it's really profound. Like, I mean, the only way I think doctors get through school, most of them, is realizing that they're gonna love helping people because the torture of going through med school. I don't know how other way they would get through that.
And then Nick, anything you want to add on?
I just think that as a whole, it's kind of crazy to me that even though your emotions are kind of half your life, like your intellect's your other half, is that there's nothing in school or societal that really helps people go through their emotions. They have to end up going therapy as adults instead of learning these things about themselves as a child and learning stuff. So I just think, I guess my last thoughts, just thinking of ways or like communicating with the younger generation on learning about their emotions before they just have that moment where they just break down and have to go to a therapist or need outside help. If we can just like catch more kids, that'd be great, and teach them that their emotions are okay, their sadness is okay, and have that, what Erica said, a complete acceptance of how their body works and what goes through it is okay as long as they know how to turn it into positive. outcomes in the end.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely like our duty to help raise the next generation in a way where they, like you're saying, understand that these things, that like emotions are okay to have.
Hmm.
All right. I just want to say I'm so thankful that you guys were able to come on and talk with us today. I was talking, I think, to my girlfriend about you, Erica, and you, Enrique, about how excited I was to hear your guys' thoughts and listen to both of you guys talk. I have like a profound respect for both of you. Erica and I have been friends for a really long time, so like that respect's just been there for a really long time. And I told my girlfriend, I was like, yeah, one time I heard like Enrique, usually he's like joking around, and we're all joking around, but he started talking about like some serious stuff, and he gave some like really good points. I was like, wow, this guy's really smart. This guy's really intelligent. And it was like it's like that thought hadn't been like that you were dumb before. It's just you showed me your intelligence to like such an extent where like that respect was just like automatically there. And so I'm thankful that you guys were like both able to come on and talk with us. I'm really appreciative of it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And I will talk to you all later, and thank you so much for listening.